This is CHSR 97.9 FM here in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. This is Python's Paradise, your film and music show, and this is your host, Greg Gilbert, aka the Python Hyena. And folks, Joy of Sex celebrating its 35th anniversary this year. And of course, Martha Coolidge, one of the outstanding female directors, breaking new ice with this in Valley Girl. And we have my sixth interview from the film. On the phone with me today, we have Farouk himself on the phone, Danton Stone. How you do, Danton?
I do great, Greg. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. It's interesting because Joy of Sex came out the same year as 16 Candles, and what the two films really have in common is 16 Candles had Long Duck Dong, and Joy of Sex has Farouk. Very parallel, but both the same year. Have you ever had that brought up before?
I have not, but you have. I think you're right, and I could see why you made that connection.
Mm-hmm.
You have that same kind of role in the movie. We're both, the sort of the foreign man, and who plays a sort of a, who has sort of a like a philosophical and comedic bent in the story.
Mm-hmm.
I could see that connection.
Yes. Well, I'm going to say your character, very, very innocent. I love the plot twist at the end that I won't give away with your character. But
oh no, don't give anything away. There's still some people who haven't seen it, and I hope that this will encourage them to check out the film. But yeah, no, there's some twists and turns there.
Well,
and, yeah, go ahead.
Do you still have people come up and say, "Give me 5"?
I have a small, very select cult following of Farouk appreciators, and over the years, they've dwindled some. I have to be honest. It's dwindled down from, a few hundred to maybe a couple dozen, but there still are people who. You like being remembered, to whatever degree, for something that you did, and that Farouk definitely has been remembered.
How many $5 bills have you given away now?
I give no money away. That's my policy. Is when I'm recognized for my work. Although it's tempting to want to pay people just for recognizing me, I don't give people any money.
That was a one-time thing, huh?
Yeah, just the one time. Yeah.
When you go to restaurants, do you ever say to the waiter, "Thank you for the shit"?
No, again, it would make me seem strange, and it's really, I try to get along in the world and in the world of civilians. But when I'm acting, and when I'm in character, I sometimes do strange things, and sometimes when I'm doing a character, I stay in character, for the course of the filming or the play. Sometimes off stage as a way of keeping myself. Like your muscles your acting muscles keep really fresh,
mm-hmm.
sharp. And so I have, when I was doing the film, been in character and talked the Farouk talk in restaurants. And actually, when I was doing research to learn the accent, I went to that part of Brooklyn and Atlantic Avenue. And I had a tape recorder with me, and I was taping inadvertently. I probably should have been honest about it, but I was being sneaky, and I was inadvertently taping a man I was talking to just to kind of get his accent. And then when we were having a nice conversation, and I was just listening, talking regular, and he was talking, and he was a very intelligent, articulate, and really interesting dude. And he was talking, and I'm like soaking up his accent and this and that, and taping it. And then, but I had the tape recorder inside my bag, which was on the table, and the tape recorder in the middle of our conversation made a very loud click. And when I ran out of tape, and he was that was when it called to his attention that he was being taped, and he was not. He was a little disappointed in me.
Oh.
And then I had to apologize and explain what I was doing there.
Well, I gotta say, that was one of the funniest scenes in the movie, where, of course, Charles Van Eman says to you, he says, when you have a meal, it's polite to say, thank you for the shit. And, of course, you say it at his house to his mom.
Well, I took him literally, man.
I love that.
Farouk's an innocent person, and, and he wants to fit in and do things the good American way. And, yeah, Chip Van Eman he was having fun at my expense, as they all did. Farouk was kind of like your comparison to the dude in 16 Candles.
Yeah.
Everybody had his way making fun of Farouk, but Farouk turned out to be a pretty smart, pretty attractive guy in his own right, and so he wins in his way too.
Yeah,
all very fun.
Yeah. Well, I gotta say, if you would mind giving us a little bit of your background and even how you got your part in Joy of Sex.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm a New York City guy. I'm from Queens, born and raised, and then I moved to Manhattan when I was 17 to be an actor. And I just sort of hit the ground running. I started working. I mean, I've worked. I'm a journeyman actor, and have been for decades. And I've done probably 100 parts in stage and TV and film, and big parts, small parts, bad parts, good parts. I'm a character guy, so my thing has just been to change myself up to fit what the script is, what the story is, what the part wants to be, and so Martha Coolidge, the wonderful director of Joy of Sex, who was a part of this. This was one of a movement in the early '80s when there was very few women who had, up until then, who were prominently directing Hollywood films, and then there was a flush of like 4 or 5 really talented, interesting filmmakers, and they got a crack at doing 5 or 10 films. Mm-hmm. And Martha was a person who came to the theater a lot. She had friends in the theater, and she was a film person, a documentarian, a wonderful documentary she made, and got a lot of attention for it. So they gave her some feature films, and she did Valley Girl, and it was a big hit. Mm-hmm. And Nick Cage, and launched a lot of wonderful people, some of whom were in Joy of Sex. Mm-hmm. And she was holding auditions, and she came to see a play. I was doing an off-Broadway play, a wonderful play. I had a great part, and I wasn't half bad in it. And she came to see this play, and she knew one of the people who was producing it, and she talked to me afterwards, and she said, you're a pretty funny dude, and this and that. You want to audition for this movie? I'm going to be directing. And I said, of course. And where and when, and I showed up, and there was her and these other producers and the people from the movie company, and I had worked up a little performance for Farouk, a kind of a sketch, because it was only an audition, but you have to work up a character in an audition to get the part. So I worked something up, and I came in, and I started doing it, and I do like I'm not like a halfway measures kind of a guy. I mean, I did it pretty full out. Mm-hmm. And the room was laughing pretty hard, and I booked that sucker, and that's it, man. That's how I did it.
Talk about the graveyard scene, because that was pretty funny.
Yeah, well, the graveyard scene. Well, what I remember about it, Greg, was that when we were shooting in the graveyard, we had to. Chuck Carell, I think, was the DP, and Martha, they were trying to go, how can we make this thing, like, kind of crazy? I mean, and how are we going to let this guy drop in a hole? Are we gonna just let this actor just fall in the hole? And then, and they were going like, I don't know if that's even believable. Like, that's too stupid. It's just too stupid for words. And I piped up and I said, ladies and gentlemen, if you think it's too stupid, you've got the right man for the job. Because I will fall in that hole and make you believe it, that I didn't see it, and it'll be it'll sing or dance, whatever. And
well, it was night.
It was night.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was believable.
I think so. Yeah.
But it was, there's always a little danger there that you twist an ankle or something. But I'm always pretty game for a stunt if I think it'll get a laugh.
They didn't put like a mat or something under there so you could land on?
They did. I can't pretend that it was. I don't want to act like I was doing a war movie.
Yeah, that scene was pretty funny. And, of course, you're playing the foreign exchange student, and there's a lot of interesting people in this movie. And, of course, Martha Coolidge, she and Amy Heckerling, who did Fast Times at Ridgemont High, kind of came around right around the same time in terms of making their feature films and really launched things for female directors. And Martha's had a real she has a real eye on young people, and
yes, she does. Yes,
mm-hmm.
Good feeling for young people.
Yeah. And, of course, a great cast in this. I've had, like I said, you're the sixth person I've had on here. I was supposed to have Charles Van Eman on the show, but he ended up having to cancel because of scheduling issues. But he and I had a nice little chat on the phone, and he would like to hook up sometime in the future. But, of course, he's his family's family you're staying with, Farouk's staying with, and, he's the one that's putting all these ideas in your head and whatnot. Like I said, the dinner scene was great. I'd love to see how, afterwards, how he had to explain that. Talk about working with him.
Oh, Charlie Van Eman, we used to call him Chip.
Mm-hmm.
He was great to work with. He was really, he's a very... He's a really good actor and just a charming guy. And there were a lot of good people in the film. Chris Lloyd was in the film.
Christopher Lloyd playing the gym teacher.
The gym teacher, and he was a pleasure to work with too. And I just loved his work, so much. He was, of course, Reverend Jim on Taxi,
mm-hmm.
and he's done, and he was in the Back to the Future movies,
mm-hmm.
and I really enjoyed him, and he and I had a couple of nice chats, and we used to talk. Chris Lloyd and I talked about the kind of jobs that we did outside of acting, and. Because you're always having to pick up a side job now and then, and he was interested in what I had been working on before I did a couple of years before I got The Joy of Sex, because I'd done some plays and a couple of films and stuff like that, but just a few years before that I was doing some others. I was a house painter and this and that, and he said, well, what was the job that you took most seriously outside of acting? I said I would probably have to be when I was foreman of the dishwashing crew at a summer theater. That's how I paid for my way into doing the parts at the summer theater and staying there. And I was a foreman of the dishwashing crew. And Chris Lloyd thought it was so hilarious that I was the foreman of the dishwashing crew.
Okay.
It wasn't just that I could be a dishwasher, it's that I had to be the foreman.
Mm-hmm.
He just laughed a lot about that, and I don't know what that says about him or me, but anyway, I just remembered that about working and talking to him.
I remember that scene where he goes, "Where's Farouk?" And he says, "Where he's from, it's prayer time." You're out there on the lawn on your knees.
Right, exactly. Yeah, facing Mecca.
Yeah. Yeah, that was funny. Yeah, I heard a backstory that John Belushi was supposed to be in this movie, and of course he had passed away. And I'm wondering, do you know anything about that? And what was it, Chris Lloyd's part he was supposed to play, or do you know anything about that?
He was supposed to. It was a completely. I only know about that from having read that lurid biography of John Belushi by Bob Woodward.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that John Belushi was in development with the studios
Mm-hmm.
to do it was really National Lampoon's The Joy of Sex.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first title of the movie. I don't know that it's still even called that. I think it's just called Joy of Sex.
I heard Matty Simmons was not pleased about that because he said National Lampoon's had nothing to do with this.
Yes, and that's why it was probably some legal action. Although again, I don't really know. I mean, I don't know anything. I'm just like
Yeah.
I was just on board for the shooting.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the Belushi thing. I know from reading in a book that Belushi was tied to the project and that he was developing it. But I think they were trying to make with Belushi. I might be wrong, but I think they were trying to make a comedic version of the manual, the book, The Joy of Sex, which was a sex manual.
Okay.
You understand the evolution from the title Joy of Sex, which is they bought the title to a famous late 1970s or early 1980s book, which was The Joy of Sex, which was a sex manual book. It was a book on how to have more evolved, more exciting, more variable sex life. And so National Lampoon created a National Lampoon's Joy of Sex, and I think my guess is they were going to make a comedy out of the sex manual.
Okay.
And then of course, as is making the movies, things change and morph, to something else. And this certainly changed. This changed into a teenage romantic sex comedy. Isn't that sort of what you would call this?
Yes. Yeah. And Cameron Dye came over from Valley Girl, and doesn't have Nicolas Cage with him, but he did kind of have an accident in the gym.
He did. He had a rough going. Also a very fun guy to know and to be around, as was Bob Prescott.
Mm-hmm.
Played the terrorizing jock in that, and Michelle Mayrink was also lovely performer in there.
I had Michelle on here back last December, and
did you?
Yeah.
Oh God, she's such a good actor and such a lovely person to work with.
I had her on here back in December. She because she was in Valley Girl, and I loved her in Valley Girl, and I had her on for
that too.
Yeah.
I agree.
And I asked her about what it was like to go from Valley Girl to playing the lead in Joy of Sex. And she said she was kind of nervous about it, but I know Martha Coolidge has used her a lot, and, real genius. I mean, she had a lot of faith in Michelle, and of course Michelle has since kind of left the business, but she, I guess, teaches acting or something right now. But Michelle had an interesting part in this. She's the innocent, naive teenage daughter of Christopher Lloyd, and of course she sees a mole on her chest, and she thinks she's got some kind of disease, and of course that's where she goes in and sees our fellow Eugene Robert Glazer as Dr. Fox. The most perverse doctor ever.
Yeah, this is really bringing it back to me. Yeah, there was a pretty complicated plot in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And somebody that I became really, really good friends with is Lisa Langlois. I had her on twice on my show. And I knew her from the 80s from the movie Class of 1984. And Lisa's become a friend because I've lived here in New Brunswick, Fredericton, New Brunswick, for I'd say a good 45 years. And I'd never flown, never been anywhere. And Lisa asked what was stopping me. And I was always nervous about traveling. And she invited me to Toronto to Horrorama, a horror film convention, to be her assistant. And I couldn't say no.
And what was that experience like?
It was fantastic. I've been back there once since, and I actually call Lisa on a weekly basis. So she and I talk a lot, and she sends convention stuff to me, and she did a charity challenge I threw out to her for suicide and depression, and
Did she? I mean, did she go on and do other roles that I would have known about? Does she still do parts, or had done some other parts that were significant like this?
oh yeah, she was in. Well, of course, she was in Class of 1984, which was an early film with Michael J. Fox, and Roddy McDowall was in it. And she was in a lot of independent stuff,
Right.
But she kind of got me out of my funk, and and it was an honor to assist her at this event. I sat at her table, took pictures of her with her fans, and kept her table tidy, and she's been so encouraging on this podcast, and she showed me ways to improve, and she even helped me in developing what are the business cards. So Lisa's been very, very instrumental, and I was her fan in the '80s, still a fan, but she's become a friend, and because she, of course, was the best friend of Michelle Mayrank in Joy of Sex, and
Right.
it's funny because there's a scene where she's peeling an orange using her fingernails, and I had dinner with her a few times, because every time I go to Toronto, I always look up Lisa, and we connect, and I always take her out to dinner, but I've actually watched her peel an orange, and last time I watched Joy of Sex, it's like, I witnessed that.
Right. Okay. So it's like life imitating art.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but Lisa is wonderful, and she's become a great friend, and I know that you had some scenes with her towards the end of the movie. What were your memories of working with her?
Well, of course, what you remember about somebody is just the pleasure of being on camera in a scene pretending to not know somebody,
Mm-hmm.
which you don't, but pretending like you know them or want to know them,
Mm-hmm.
and just bouncing off that thing that actors do, which is it's like you play your music.
Mm-hmm.
You if you can get some music going, and I just remember that it was nice making music with her.
Yeah. Well, Lisa's nice. She's a wonderful person. And of course, Heidi Hullecker came over from Valley Girl to be in this as well. And I had Heidi on back at the end of January. Both Lisa and Heidi. Heidi is in talks of doing it, but I donated to both of her and Lisa. I've donated to charities that they're involved in, because they're both into animal charities. And after the Ice Bucket Challenge, there was this one for Robin Williams when for suicide and depression, called the Doubtfire Face Challenge, and it's
Okay.
yeah. Well, what it involves is the person takes a pie in the face, and they nominate 3 people. And I did this, and I threw it out to people I interviewed, and Lisa accepted the challenge, and she did it. And Heidi just accepted the challenge. And I always, in turn, I donate to one of their charities, and Heidi was involved with one called Rescue Dog. And so I said to Heidi, I said, I'll donate to your charity if you do Doubtfire Challenge. And she said, deal.
Nice. Very nice.
Yep.
And it's nice that you do these charities, and I like it that people also are thinking about animals, and and doing rescue for them, because it really is boy, if you have an animal in your life, and
I got a kitty.
You got a kitty. Yeah, I had a kitty for a long time, and now I have a dog, and they really are they're really lucky that they get homes, that they get a home.
Yeah.
Because of the other ones, the ones that don't get a home, they don't get to have a good life. and anything that's boy, they really make your life better, don't they?
Yes, they do.
Love your cat.
Yes. Well, my brother and his fiance had 2 ferrets, and they really loved the ferrets. And
Yeah. I mean, people. It's amazing which a lot of different kinds of animals make different great pets.
Yeah, well, anytime they needed to find something, they just looked under the bed because the ferrets would take everything under the bed.
Right.
But I love my cat, and because I knew that after the Ice Bucket Challenge, I knew that people want to see people in pop culture do these challenges. So I thought, well, depression's something that's not given enough attention, so I brought that up, and I've been trying to get people I've interviewed involved with that. So Lisa's done it. I've had a few others do it, and Heidi is set to do it. She hasn't done it yet, but she's been keeping in touch with me about it. So yeah. And if you want to do it, that's up to you too. All you have to do is just name one of your charities, and I'll do a donation for it in return.
Okay, thanks. That's nice.
Yeah, just if you know people in the industry, just fire a nomination out to 3 of them, because that's what I'm trying to do here. Depression's not taken very seriously.
Well, it's I didn't know that it wasn't taken seriously. It certainly seems like it's certainly in the news.
Yes, you're right. You're right. Yeah. But getting away from that for a minute, though, Heidi Holliker, of course, was in Joy of Sex. You got any memories of her?
I can't place her. Can you? Who did she play?
Well, she was one of the students. She didn't have a big part in Joy of Sex, but I know she was in the classroom scene and made a comment about one of the diagrams that was on the board. Something about looking like.
Sorry, I can't. Yeah, I can't. I don't know that I had any scenes with her or any work with her, and I can't. I'm not. Her face is eluding me right now.
Okay. You remember Joanne Barron, because I've had her on here.
I do.
I had her on talk about Valley Girl, but we can't forget her as the really, to put it bluntly, horny sex ed teacher.
Well, Joanne Barron is she's a very fine actress, and a little bit of in trivia is that Joanne Barron and I went to acting school together, and we were scene partners in acting school. So I've known Joanne Barron for a really long time. I admire her very much.
I thought that was funny when people kept gluing stuff, like they glue all the Mr. Potato Heads all over the trophies, and she gets in there and she tries to use the phone and it rips out of the wall.
That's very funny.
Oh, she had a really good comedic role in that, and until I watched it recently, I forgot how funny she was in this movie. Yeah. And then, of course, who can forget Colleen Camp?
Now, she's also somebody that I've worked with a number of times, and she's an outstanding comic actor. Colleen Camp, I did a television series with Colleen Camp. Tom Arnold, his second TV show, this was for, I believe, CBS, was called Tom, and Colleen Camp and I played Tom's sidekick and friend, and she played my wife. And she has very interesting acting credits. She was, of course, in Apocalypse Now.
Yeah, loved her. Yeah, I loved that.
She's great. And she's just also, Colleen Camp has an interesting acting style, because sometimes she has such an eccentric delivery, and it's so particular because she's just she's one of those wonderful actors that just cannot help but be themselves in a part, and I mean that as a compliment, and truly. And she is I just loved working with her, and I loved being around her on set because she just cracked me up. I loved her in Joy of Sex, but I also loved her on the Tom Arnold show that I did with her as she was playing my wife. She would it's just hard not to laugh.
Oh yeah,
working with an actor like that.
Well, I loved her in Apocalypse Now, and I got to say too, she and Frederick Forrest, who are both in Apocalypse Now, the
Yeah.
parents in Valley Girl.
Yeah, and Fred Forrest. I mean, my
Hmm.
God, what a fantastic actor
Yeah,
Fred Forrest is.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
Colleen, of course, playing the older student, so to speak.
Yeah, right. But she's a narc, right?
She's a narc.
Yeah.
I loved how upfront she was and her delivery. She said exactly what was on her.
Her delivery's hilarious. She's hilarious.
She is funny. She is so funny. And yeah, Joy of Sex. I don't know what you would remember about its release, but I guess it did not quite do as well as Valley Girl. It kind of fell by the
No,
wayside.
it was a bit of yeah. It was a step down commercially and critically.
Mm-hmm.
I think that yeah. Joy of Sex seems to be an acquired taste. It's a cult movie. Joy of Sex is also like I got to tell you my personal thing about why I like having done it so much. And really, I have my brother, Dr. Michael Stone of Chicago, Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
Is a he's a shrink. He's a wonderful psychologist and one of the brightest, most effervescent and hilarious people that I ever met. And he was a real influence on me, and in terms of being funny and having a philosophy of life. He owns The Joy of Sex, and he watches it. He told me he watched it. I talked to him about a month ago, and he told me, "Oh, I just watched The Joy of Sex again." And then he did one of my Farouk routines. He has watched The Joy of Sex 250 times.
Oh, he counted them?
Yeah, no, he's completely aware of how many times he's seen. He's a multiple movie watcher. He's a movie fanatic, but he especially loves like you. He has a real appreciation of the romantic sex comedies of the '80s.
Oh, yes, I do. Yep.
Yeah, well, I mean that's my brother Mike too, in a nutshell. And he and he watches it, and my parents, mom and dad like it too, and it's just funny and fun. That like again, it wasn't necessarily a commercial success, but to my brother and my parents, it was it was a wonderful. It's like a wonderful thing that that they can see this movie over and over again and enjoy it. And I don't know, I get kind of a kick out of it.
Well, it was also a pretty extensive part for you too. It was,
It was, listen, man, when you get to work 6 weeks on a movie, I mean, that's a big part. I mean, you don't, a lot of times you get on a movie. I've done a lot of movies, and you're only on. Sometimes you're on for a day. Sometimes you're on for a week. If you're on a picture for 2, 3, 4, 6 weeks, it becomes like your family, like your gig, like you are part of the fabric of the thing. And Joy of Sex and Martha Coolidge, such a bright, such a talented, such a like a lovely person to be at work with. And you're going to learn so much and just be so excited to go to work every day that even if you're in a scenes where you're part of the ensemble and you're not necessarily the focal point of the attention, you're just soaking up all the beauty of being around all these talented, fun people making a talented, fun, funny movie. And in fact, if maybe the movie didn't turn out to be a big hit, but there's a lot of people who dig it.
Oh, there's a lot of movies. There's a lot of movies that. Yeah.
I mean, I gotta tell you, I'm gonna brag on myself too. I mean, there's a guy. You might know this guy. His name is Joe Bob Briggs, and he's a pretty big. He's written dozens of film books and books on culture, and and like yourself, I mean, I think he has a show where he does music and film reviews and interviews. But Joe Bob Briggs has really written a lot of film books, and he's an aficionado of, he calls it the drive-in movie film.
Oh, nice. What's his book called? What's his book called?
This one is Joe Bob Goes to the Movies or something. And anyway, in it, he reviews. He likes slasher films.
Same here.
Horror films. He likes B, C, D movies that people say are no good, but then he'll write a review about how, wait a minute, man, this is a great movie, and here's why. And he'll write a very hilarious sometimes, or just an eloquent defense of like an offbeat movie. Well, he reviews The Joy of Sex in one of his books. I think it's Joe Bob Goes to the Movies.
Okay.
And he gives it, a stellar review. And he said, and he mentioned the actors, and he said this and that, and this is good, and this is good. And he says, and I just have one thing to say. Academy Award nomination from Joe Bob's for Best Supporting Actor 1983. Danton Stone as Farouk.
Of course, the film came out in 1984, but...
Right, well, okay, all right, you got me, but... Still,
I'm gonna have to look that up because I also love the slasher film teen films.
I'm not lying. He's nominated. So I got Joe Bob's Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actor that year for my work as Farouk. And you know what? That piece is cut. I cut it out. At first, I got another copy of it. I cut it out. I put it in a frame, and I put it on my wall. It's on my wall looking at me right now as I'm talking to you.
Wow. I'm going to have to look him up. Joe Bob Briggs, huh?
Yeah, man. He's written a ton of film books. And they're like, and I think his specialty he calls it like the drive-in movie,
I like that.
No, he's cool. And the books are great. I mean, they're very entertaining. And they're film criticism for the common man, for the everyday guy, not for the intellectuals.
Wow. Yeah, I like that. That's my scene too, the drive-in.
I have a feeling you'd relate to that drive-in.
Yes. Well, we haven't had drive-ins here since the mid '80s, but I went and my family used to go, and I remember so many films we saw at the drive-ins here. We saw the original Star Wars trilogy at the drive-in here. So, but
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But he probably liked my YouTube channel because I've interviewed a lot of people from these kind of films. And like even when Lisa and I was at Horrorama, like I got a lot of interview contacts just through that. So, and
I think it's cool. I just have always loved. I've always loved movies and TV shows that are, they're my shows.
Mm-hmm.
They strike a nerve in me, or they make me laugh, or they can be surprisingly interesting. And of course, other, and even mainstream great commercial filmmakers are completely out front about their influence from B films. I mean, Quentin Tarantino, literally, I mean, he remakes, Italian movies, Japanese movies, drive-in movies. I mean, he'll do a $100 million remake, or a rethinking of a drive-in movie.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because he loves the genre movies, right? And that's what we love. I mean, genre movies are they're the shit, man. I mean, that's where you wake up, where you go to the movies not to fall asleep but to wake up.
Yeah. And let's not forget in Joy of Sex, Carpenter. I thought that was funny too. I love that he hears the woman making orgasms. This Carpenter grabs the axe and beats her down. And Carpenter. Yeah, that's very funny. You've done some other films I got to touch upon too, like 8 Men Out. You had an interesting part in that.
Yes, I did. That's right.
Yeah.
That was a very and that was sure. I played John Sayles made that film.
Yep.
Oh my God, he's a fantastically interesting filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
And this film, the guy I was cast as in the script, his name, he didn't have a name. They just called him the Little assassin.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, they were looking for a guy under 5'10" to scare the living crap out of a baseball player to make him throw a game. This is based on the true story of the Black Sox scandal in Chicago, and how they threw the World Series. And and so I was a Stone Killer in that one, and was it? Yeah, it's just as much fun playing a Stone Killer as it is to play an exchange student, an innocent, joyous, intelligent, sociable exchange student from Abu Dhabi. I mean, it's just a different take.
Talk about going from Farouk to this character. I mean, that's quite a leap.
Yeah, it's really, it's really all, everything is, it's all, that's the joy of the profession. I mean, that's you have the joy of sex, and, for me, it's the joy of acting and the joy of pretending. And John Sayles is different from Martha Coolidge, as he is on one hand, but on the other hand, they're very similar. They're both super smart, super talented, creative people. And when I get on the set with John Sayles, and he tells me, he goes, look, this is what I want. I want you to, I want you to be dark. I want you to be really dark, be really understated about it. But I want to feel the darkness in you when you're. This scene is like John Sayles. He said, I want this scene to only be you cleaning your gun, wrapping it up, and assembling it, and then putting it in a chamois cloth, and putting it in your suitcase, closing your suitcase, taking a look at this crummy hotel room, and walking out the door. And that's going to be your whole character. That's how we're going to learn everything about your part and who you are in this movie. And I'm going to shoot that, and we're going to shoot that today. So there's no line, but that's what John Sayles says to me. And that's the same thing. Okay, so then I have that in me, right? So, so Greg, so if somebody said that to you, somebody's like super smart and talented like John Sayles, if he said that to you, what would you do?
You do it, I guess.
Right? You do it. You do it exactly the way, like from the feeling the guy says. So when I'm doing The Joy of Sex, and Martha Coolidge says, you remember the scene where they first introduced me, and Pittman, the guy that Robert Prescott played, this huge jock with bottle cap glasses, and he's like a monster. He says hello to me, but he jumps. It scares the crap out of me, so I jump back and practically knock myself unconscious against the lockers.
Yeah,
and that was my first shot of the day, my first shot of my whole part in Joy of Sex. So when Martha says to me, I want Pittman to say hello to you, but whatever he does, I don't know what he's going to do, but if it makes you do something funny, that would be great.
Oh, that was a payoff.
Oh, Martha said. But so Greg, so what would you do? So what would you do if Martha on your first day of the set of Joy of Sex goes, I want you're the new guy in school, you're a smaller dude, and this huge guy comes up to you and says hello to you in a way that terrifies you. What would you do?
Well, if he says give me 5, I would nonchalantly reach into my wallet, open it up, but I'd probably say something along the lines of, "Do you have any? Can you break a 10 or something like that, or something along those lines?" It had a good payoff, I tell you. Like,
well, the thing, he just jumped at me, and it just made me jump backwards, and I slammed my head against the locker. And, so I guess the difference is night and day, but it's all just like rolling with whatever the feeling seems right for the circumstances and for what the director seems to be up to.
And he was the one that had the big rubber dildo too, and he got Christopher Lloyd takes him to the office.
Oh, he was I think he's hilarious, that guy.
Oh yeah. Well, I tried to find him to get him on here, but I couldn't find any information. But I gotta say,
Well,
he's
maybe, people fly under the radar in this business too. They come and go. A lot of actors are like, we're like, live different lives. Sometimes we were actors for a while, then we go do other things, and then somebody sees us and brings us back into something. Joe Pesci.
yep.
Joe Pesci was, he started out as a singer,
Mm-hmm.
and then he did one movie. Starred in a movie, a small, like one of these kind of movies we're talking about, a drive-in kind of movie. And then he went back to work as a manager of a restaurant. And Bob De Niro and Marty Scorsese saw the movie that Joe Pesci did, and he'd been out of the business for at least a couple of years. And then they found Joe Pesci working in a restaurant as a manager, managing a restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
Worked with Frank Vincent, I think, who also. Oh no, he used to sing with Frank Vincent, who he ended up being in a lot of films with. But anyway, Bob De Niro and Marty Scorsese, they just found Joe Pesci working at his regular job, and they said, "You got to read for this thing. You're perfect for the part of the brother in Raging Bull."
Oh yeah.
And he didn't want to do it, man. He didn't want to do it. He didn't want to put himself out there like that and be, maybe get his heart broken. But, they were like, those guys are persuasive and sensitive. And
Oh, he knocked it out of the park.
He knocked it out of the park.
Yep.
That's right. That's exactly what he did.
Mm-hmm.
And, but I mean, if they hadn't come back to him, Joe Pesci could have still been working in that restaurant.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying about when you say, like you can't find, you go looking for Bob. Bob was so great in this movie. He's, I'm looking for Bob. I can't find him anywhere. He might be off doing a play in a regional theater, or he might be, he might have started a .com company. I mean, you just don't.
I'm just thinking in the back of my head, wouldn't it be funny if he was working in a sex store and selling those dildos? Have Christopher Lloyd come in there. What are you doing? That'd be funny.
Well, you're really good. You're really good at identifying people with their parts. So you got to give.
Literally, he had a part right in his hand. I just thought it was funny. Christopher Lloyd runs over and goes, "All right, it's in the office with you." Of course, Ernie Hudson playing the principal as well. Like, this is the same year he did Ghostbusters.
Right, exactly. I forgot Ernie was in it. He's a fantastic actor.
Mm-hmm.
And Ernie, I was also on another TV series with Ernie. We were on Oz together, which I don't know if you remember, but HBO had a series about 10 years ago.
I remember the title, yeah.
Oh my God! It was a Tom Fontana series, and this Tom Fontana is a brilliant television writer and playwright. But Tom wrote Homicide, which ran on NBC for 8 years, and he wrote that with his partner, and Tom wrote Oz, and which took place in a maximum security prison, and it had a regular cast of Edie Falco, Terry Kinney, Ernie Hudson. I mean, you really unbelievable people. And I had a recurring role on that as a assistant district attorney. And oh my goodness, Ernie was on Ghostbusters also. The original Ghostbusters.
Yeah, they tried to get Eddie Murphy, I guess, and they got Ernie Hudson. Ernie Hudson didn't hurt it at all. Yep.
Ernie's he's quite an actor.
Speaking of quite an actor, you did a movie called Crazy People, and Dudley Moore, of course, no longer with us. I've heard a few stories about him, all good. What was your experience with Dudley?
A doll, a prince, a hilarious genius. He was just a joy to work with. And he's one of those actors. He was a superstar when I worked with him because he'd just done Arthur and 10, and those were $100 million grossing movies. And for in those days, when a film grossed $100 million, and you were the lead, you were a superstar, buddy.
Yep.
And Dudley was doing Crazy People with us, and not only was he a charming and funny, delightful actor and musician, he was classical. He could play Ravel, and he could play anything on the piano, and and tell jokes and keep the set happy and alive. But he was also singularly generous to the entire cast.
Oh,
I mean,
nice.
again, I had a big part in the sense that I was on the whole movie, and that was a movie that was shot and reshot over and over again. So we were on that movie for months. So we were like a family, a tight group, and there were some brilliant people in there. But Dudley was particularly distinguished himself to me with his sweetness to the other cast members, and he was generous to the actors, which is great. I mean, most I've worked with some stars, Oscar-winning actors, and really truly, I got to tell you, Greg, most of them are super nice.
Yep.
Really honest to God. Or if they're not nice, like in the conventional sense of nice, sometimes they're tough and rigorous and and exacting in what they want from you. But they're great people. They have substance and warmth, and they care about you being good. Most of them are like that. But Dudley was like that. Holly Hunter, the great actress who's an Academy Award winner.
Yeah, you worked with her in Once Around. Yep.
Yeah, and especially her and Jenna Rollins, who played my mother. Do you remember Jenna Rollins?
Yes, I do. Married to John Cassavetes.
You got it. I got to tell you. I mean, I just got to tell you what it was like just to be able to say that I played Jenna Rollins' son in that movie, and got to spend 7 weeks working in a movie. First of all, John Cassavetes and Jenna Rollins made some of the great. They were the progenitors of independent film. They were basically, John Cassavetes basically invented independent filmmaking in America.
Yep.
He did it all himself, and Jenna Rollins was his closest collaborator.
Oh yeah.
And he wrote all those parts for her, and she played them brilliantly. Genius acting. And then she comes on this film, and I get cast in this film as her son, Holly Hunter's brother. And this is a big spot for me. And, I got to tell you, they were such fantastic actors to work with and learn from. But also, Jenna Rollins is the nicest person. She's the best actor and the nicest person I've ever worked with.
Oh, nice.
She was so nice to every single person, and I mean the actors, the crew, the craft services. I mean, there was just a generosity of spirit that she was just an inspirational person to work with.
I heard similar stories about Roger Moore, that he was one of these people that would go around and he would meet the crew and the craft service, and they say he was just very engaging with everybody around him. I heard that about him as well.
Really?
Yeah.
I never know anybody that worked with him.
I've interviewed a couple people that worked with him, and they said the same thing. They said he...
Isn't that... don't you kind of like hearing about that?
I love that. You see, you don't hear this in the media, they just want to dig for dirt. I like hearing these stories because they're more down to earth, they're more relatable.
I just think that that there's an obsession with bad news in the media when it comes to entertainment, and also we like to see our heroes have feet of clay. That's a popular American story in the in magazines and newspapers. So a lot of it involves building somebody up and then having them display some kind of flaw and then having them fall. It gets a little old, but most of my experiences in the acting profession have been interesting and joyful, and most of the people I've worked with have been either super nice or interesting, and and if you do occasionally meet somebody who you don't get along with, you're probably never going to see him again anyway, so it's a wash.
Well, you also did He Said, She Said, where you get to work, of course, Kevin Bacon and Elizabeth Montgomery. Yeah.
Yep, and there you go, and Kevin Bacon and Elizabeth Perkins. There you go. You got two people who.
Oh, I said Elizabeth Montgomery. Okay, I'm sorry about that.
No, it was Betsy Perkins, Elizabeth Perkins, and she's done a lot of things, and they're both also they're delightful people, and great actors. And Kevin Bacon is Kevin Bacon is he's Kevin Bacon, and he was a gas to work with. You know what I mean? He's like he just wants to get in there and work with you and jam. It's like being a musician with a guy like Kevin Bacon. It's like you get in there, say hello. It's like strap on your guitar, get out your drums, whatever the part is, whatever the music is that they want from you, and the guy just wants to play with you.
Yeah.
Fun. It's fun.
Again, heard good things about Kevin as well, so.
And what a professional, and what an actor. I mean, look at all the variety of characters and roles he's played. I mean, geez, I got nothing but admiration for Kevin Bacon.
Nathan Lane in that.
Huh?
Nathan Lane was in that. Sharon Stone.
I mean, yeah. I mean, this. I didn't have any work to do with those guys. I didn't even meet them. Because you're on a picture for. In that case, I was on that picture for a week. But Kevin and Betsy Perkins were the only ones I had anything to do with. But it's fun to see people like Nathan Lane and Sharon Stone just to walk by them.
Yeah.
Do you remember the old television series Bewitched with Elizabeth
Yes, I do.
Montgomery?
Yep, I do.
So I did a movie, a TV movie some years ago where I played a sort of I get cast a lot of times as sort of a kind of a hood, who's maybe a little mixed up or maybe a little confused, he's going to get punched in the mouth or something, or he's going to get stolen by some bigger crook. I'm good at playing the small fish, and this is one of those times I cast as the small fish. It was a good part. I mean, it was an interesting part. It was a well-written TV movie called Murder in Mind, and Elizabeth Montgomery was the star. And I played this guy named Benny Lazaro, and I didn't have a lot to do with her, but when she was also one of these people that she walked by me, at lunchtime, and she looked at me and she went, "Benny?" I went, and I called her by her character's name, and she's like, "Benny Lazaro?" And I was like, yeah, that's right. She's like, yeah, I think that's great. She just like vibed me all like, yeah, you look like the character from the script. I'm going to connect to you that way. And she just did that little actor to actor positive connection moment. And, and I was like, I'm a little bit starstruck because when I was a kid, I used to watch her on Bewitched. And, and I thought she was the most, bewitching actress on TV.
Yep.
And now here I was doing a TV movie with her, and she was calling me by my character's name, and we were connecting, and it makes it kind of a enchanted experience.
Yeah. And you also did McHale's Navy. Now you'll have to forgive me because I wasn't a huge fan of this movie.
You're kidding.
No, I wasn't a huge fan of it. I know it's based, but.
Well, did you feel okay about my performance?
Sure. I don't know. Maybe it's because I wasn't familiar with what it was based on, but.
No. Listen, you don't have to, Greg. I appreciate you have to be honest with me.
Yeah.
I actually, I'm actually glad you said that because it takes the curse off of talking about it.
Well,
It's okay. Listen, I forgive you. We can still be friendly, and you can not like McHale's Navy. I had a good time doing it.
mm-hmm.
I happen to really I happen to really like and respect Tom Arnold a
Okay.
lot. He's a great person, and he's a fantastic person to work with and to work for. And he's an ace. In my book, Tom Arnold is a great guy. But doing that film was not that easy. And we were in Mexico for 3.5 months, really in a small town, beautiful place, but really in the middle of nowhere, very isolated from our lives. And it was a hard shooting schedule, and it was it really was not a good script. So
Yeah, it was up for a few Razzies as well.
Yeah, man. I mean, you can't make a good movie if the script is not really together. And I have to say, I understand why you didn't like it, and I appreciate your honesty.
Okay. But I am going to ask this, though. You get to Tim Curry was in that, and of course playing the second most dangerous terrorist in the world. And of course Tim Curry is infamous for the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and Tim's just been everywhere. Talk about him.
Okay, I can tell you for sure about something about Tim Curry. He was very fun to be around on set. He was maybe also like the rest of us. There's some very well-known, very famous, and very talented actors in that movie. Again, people who you really have extensive credits, and there was not a great sense of creative freedom, or people did not feel very free.
No.
You can tell that it's something that's a combination of the chemistry with the director, the lack of things in the script, whatever. There was just people were tight. And Tim was here's a guy with not only with great credits, but I mean he's like known for, he's got an iconic character in his cachet. Dude, he's the Rocky Horror dude. So, I mean, this guy, he has every right to feel blasé or comfortable. But one of the things I really respected about him was that he really cared about how he was doing. We had some scenes together, and he was kind of like, Danton, am I all right here? Can you kind of check me? How's my honesty and my humor here? He was very vulnerable and human and dedicated and sweet, and I admired him before I came on the movie, but then working with him and seeing his seriousness of how he wanted to do well in a situation where I don't think any of us were, again, not having that easy a time for those reasons I mentioned.
You had some good people on there.
I thought Tim was a very dedicated dude, and and I thought he ended up being real good in the movie anyway.
Yeah, and Dean Stockwell, of course, was in this as well as.
Dean Stockwell, who had that unbelievable scene in Blue Velvet. I mean, who can forget Dean Stockwell in Blue Velvet?
No.
And he was a genius in that. And I had lunch with Dean my first week there, and I wanted to talk to him about what his experience was like, because I'm also like I'm really very much, I'm a movie fan, as you can probably tell from the way I blab about this stuff. I'm a fan. I mean, and I know, I mean, I'm there with Dean Stockwell and and Tim Curry and all these cool guys and women and Deborah Messing and I mean, I'm like, wow, what was it like shooting this? And Dean Stockwell explained to me how he shot everything in Blue Velvet and what David Lynch, wanted from him. And I mean, I really picked his brain because, this is actor talk and pyrotechnics and, Artie. Some of it was. I get a little arty farty too, but that's that's how I have fun. Sue me. And, so I'm like, how was this and that? And Dean was just so cool. He was just so great, and he was so like, into talking about it. And he was also very supportive of my work in the movie. He was kind of always like coming up to me after a take and telling me he thought I was doing good work or it was funny or something. People don't have to do that, Greg. I mean, they don't have to be nice, but sometimes they are, and it really, really makes a difference.
Yeah, I had nothing against your work in the film. I remember one scene that stood out to me, and I thought was so over the top, and it's like, why am I supposed to laugh at this? Because you had Dean Stockwell had all of them lined up, and he was lecturing them. One guy was turned around eating a yogurt or an ice cream or something, and he gets caught doing it. I'm sitting here thinking, why are you eating the ice cream turned around at that time? I don't know whether it was another way they could have shot it, but I just kind of threw my hands up as like, I'm just not laughing there,
Hey, I mean, I don't want to I don't want to judge anybody, but the directors make choices like that.
Yeah.
That's a director's choice.
And I'm not faulting the actor either, I mean, they're doing,
you got some pretty good actors. You got some. I mean, I don't remember which actor was doing that, but I mean, French Stewart, was in that movie, and French Stewart, he's a pretty damn good actor and a funny guy. And if he was, if you got people, like French or Bruce Campbell, who's also a hilarious actor, and myself, and you got some. Brian Haley. I mean, you got some ringers there. You got some guys who can really ring the bell with comedy.
Here's some people I got to ask about. Deborah Messing, for instance. What was your memories of her, huh?
A doll.
A
absolute, a magnificent human being, a joy. I mean, really, truly, you get on the set, you look them in the eye, the camera's rolling, you look her in the eye, she's looking at you. She's doing her part, and maybe she doesn't have the best written part in the world. Maybe you don't either, and maybe her part's really not well written, but she is making it honest, funny, truthful, and she's a joy to be with. And she, and I, we connected as friends on the set, and had some, great times talking and. Being serious and being funny the way you like to be when you keep anything to keep you loose and maybe make you be creative. But Deborah Messing is she's just an outstanding human being.
And then there's Ernest Borgnine. Like I said, the good cast in this movie.
Well, Ernie, I got, this is one of the great things about being in a Hollywood movie for 4 months. Because Ernie, they just flew Ernie in because he was the original star of the TV series from which it was based. But, he was only there for a week to do a kind of a smallish part. But he's such a class dude that, he's like, he's on the set. He's schmoozing with everybody in a super nice, almost humble way. And he's, and then he like just looks over at me and he goes, he called me by my character's name. He said, Gruber, because I played Gruber. He said, Gruber, what's your actual name? And I said, Danton, you can call me Danny. And he went, Danny, let's go have lunch.
Wow.
So it's like, I don't know, he just sort of like, so Ernie took me to lunch, and, that we just sat and we just bullshitted about this and that. Of course, I'm going to ask him, being the fan that I am, I'm going to say, okay, so what was it like shooting Bad Day at Black Rock with Spencer Tracy and Robert Ryan? Tell me about a day on the set of Black Rock. I don't want to talk about McHale's Navy. Tell me about Bad Day at Black Rock.
Yeah.
And of course Ernie was a delight. And I want to know what it's like to sit in the same room with a guy who's been on set with Spencer Tracy.
Yes.
But that's my jam. That's what I wanted. That's where I'm coming from. That's what's interesting to me, and that's what I've always wondered. what's it like to do a scene with Spencer Tracy?
Mm-hmm.
And he did some memorable scenes in that movie with Spencer Tracy.
Yeah.
So he gave me the rundown, the same way Dean Stockwell gave me the rundown about working that song where he mimes the words to "In Dreams" by Roy Orbison in the David Lynch movie. I mean, only movie actors and TV actors are going to be able to tell you what it's like empirically to do this stuff. And sometimes I get to be the witness and pick their brain. And once in a while, I get to do it myself.
Yeah. And one person I have to ask about too, and my apologies, I hope I don't come off too negative on McHale's Navy, but you got some good people in this. And of course, Bruce Campbell, super funny in everything he does.
Yeah.
I just know Sam Raimi said on Evil Dead, he said he went to set every day to try to figure out ways to abuse him.
Well, Bruce Campbell is a very unique person. I mean, he has Bruce Campbell is a very, he's almost preternaturally bright. Bruce Campbell's one of the, he acts like a dope. What's so kind of makes Bruce Campbell such an interesting actor to me is that he acts like a perfect dope. But he's a big, handsome guy with a square chin. Looks like almost a cartoonishly handsome dude. He even wrote a book called "If Chins Could Kill," and he writes comical books that are hilarious. He acts these crazy parts. Right, Sam Raimi. He's well known for having Sam Raimi just will abuse him in every particular way. And Bruce Campbell is, if you spend any time with him, he is the funniest. He's like the funniest person you're ever going to meet. He's just that bright.
I'll have a story about him to share. I remember when the movie Serving Sarah came out, and they were highlighting Matthew Perry and Elizabeth Hurley, and I got nothing against them. And I wasn't a big fan of that movie, but there were people that were going to see it because Bruce Campbell was in it. And I heard people looking at the posters like, Bruce Campbell, and his name was just in a little small print in the bottom. Their names were up there at the top, and I'm sitting there thinking, did the studio not realize they have Bruce Campbell and what his star power is?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, and I would.
I mean, he's a very big star.
Yeah, and I would love to.
I mean, he must have a huge. From all of those crazy movies where he's the one-handed guy with the saw, the chainsaw hand. I mean, and he has a unique style, Bruce. I really respect his stylishness. He has good style as an actor.
I'm hoping they do a Freddy versus Jason versus Ash movie because I would love to see that.
Wouldn't that be awesome?
It would be. Yeah. It would be so awesome.
Right? That's a good idea.
Well, I know it's been in talks, but I wish they would, collaborate in a way that can get it done. Because I remember when I don't want to get off topic here, but I remember when they brought in Ronnie Yu to direct Freddy versus Jason. He hadn't seen any of the previous movies, and he watches the first Friday the 13th and the first Nightmare on Elm Street to prepare himself. And number one, the first Friday the 13th does not prepare you to write a Jason film. You need to watch at least part 4 and 6 for that. But I was like, I don't know why they were so sloppy that way to bring in somebody that had no knowledge of it. And I'm like, if they do Freddy versus Jason versus Ash, they need to bring in somebody that has a love and appreciation for the franchises.
Yeah, you really do. You really do.
Yep.
You have to revere these things to really appreciate them.
Yeah. Now, we talked about a lot of your films, but you've done a lot of TV. I'm very strange for me because I don't watch TV anymore. I just got my Blu-ray player set up. So, because there's so much reality TV and stuff like that, if you can call it reality TV. And But I know I've watched stuff when I was younger, and I just want to know, like, looking over all these credits. I know you was in Roseanne. I know you get a good working relationship with Tom Arnold, and you was in Grace Under Fire, and Cosby and Law and Order. Tell me about some of your favorite TV parts and what your best memories are from working on TV.
Yeah, I got two that right away I can answer with. In the 1980s, about 3 or 4 years after I did Joy of Sex, I got cast as, there was a television show on called 30 Something.
Okay, yeah.
Which was, and that show was, it was something new. It was a controversial show in the sense that you either loved it or hated it, and not everybody did hate it, but the people who loved it with a passion. And it was a passionate domestic story about upper middle class people, and people who were in their 30s, who had really good jobs and really involved relationships with their families and friends. And it was about, and I was a 30-something when I did 30-something, and I got cast as Ken. You might know the actor. He's now a very important director and producer named Ken Olin.
Okay.
And Ken Olin played. He was the star of the show, and he played a man who was, really trying to, it was a very psychological domestic drama that was very well written, and I played his brother in a story arc on that show, and it was so well written and so emotional, and so a wonderful writer named Richard Kramer just wrote this story about brothers whose father dies.
Okay.
And when the father dies, the way it reverberated in the family and between the brothers is what the story was about. And I got to do this part of this dude, and I can't even, I don't want to go on and on about it because it'll get boring. But it really, truly, in my heart, that's one of my favorite parts that I ever played.
Okay.
Just because the character just wore his heart on his sleeve.
Okay.
He just couldn't hide his pain and agony about his father passing, and his love for his brother, and yet his confusion about their relationship and about the pain that was there between them, about being in business together. So that was one favorite. Another favorite, I did a Law and Order, and that was also written by a brilliant writer named Teresa Rebeck, who's just a hell of a playwright. I mean, she's written Broadway plays, and the Law and Order famously would get great writers and write these sort of formulaic, really plot-driven stories, but they were killer. They were killer TV. I mean, Law and Order held the world's record for the longest-running TV drama of all time. I think it ran 27 years.
Oh, wow.
Law and Order Criminal Intent was a spin-off of this. And Teresa Rebeck wrote an episode called Yesterday, in which I played a man who is on the verge of homelessness, and he has committed horrific crimes in his youth. Really, really bad. I'm talking about bad stuff. It's like the worst possible kind of murderous crimes. And he went underground. He did them because of his relationship with this other guy who sort of controlled him. So this is a guy who was just really at the end of his tether, and these crimes come back to haunt him, and he has to pay for it. But he ends up just being killed by the other killer. And that was a great part. This part, Ricky Morrissey, this guy that I played, and those were really my two absolutely favorite parts. Plus, I loved playing in a completely different way, in a different tone, in a comedic tone, in a lighthearted tone. I loved playing the next door neighbor on Roseanne for a season. I had a recurring role on that, and I loved being on that. Those are my three favorite all-time TV parts.
You get a good relationship with Tom Arnold, though, I take it, huh?
Yeah, Tom was he was very good to me.
Mm-hmm.
He really appreciated my work, as did Roseanne.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Roseanne was the one who really discovered me. She saw my work in the Once Around movie that we were discussing earlier, the Jenna Rollins, Holly Hunter, Richard Dreyfuss movie I did. Roseanne saw my work in that as the brother. And then she asked me to test for this part of The Next Door Neighbor, this sort of tree hugger guy, sort of a, like a kind of a guy who's married to a kind of a excitable woman, and that they should be John Goodman's and Roseanne's next door neighbor. And Roseanne absolutely loved my audition, and she put me on the show, and she really encouraged the writers to write well for me, and they did. And my part was kind of, even though it seemed like not much, it ended up being kind of special. And I was kind of really terrific in it. And I made kind of a splash. It was a number one show when I was on it. And you know what? I got recognized a whole hell of a lot on the street, and I had some fans, and people were paying attention. So she went ahead and she produced some TV shows for Tom and started trying to put me on those shows. And she succeeded in putting me on one, too.
It's interesting because Roseanne and Married with Children's another one that goes under this. I like the fact that not only are they funny, but you see a lot of sitcoms, you got beautiful people. I like Roseanne and Married with Children because it's really about what people you actually would see around,
That's right, exactly.
Like Friends,
right.
you can't relate to Friends because you got an apartment with 3 handsome guys and 3 gorgeous women. It's hard for me to relate to that. But I've seen people
Yeah, we were definitely an ungorgeous group. I mean,
Oh, it's not that. It's just that the lifestyles and whatnot. I've seen the John Goodman, Roseanne people out and around, I've seen the Al Bundys and Peg Bundys out and around, and there's something very true to life, something very real about that. I've seen the children that Roseanne and John Goodman had in the movie, there's something believable about that. I can't relate to something like Friends because there's something very vain being projected by the people making it, Oh,
I think you really hit on something too, and I think that was what made Roseanne's show, the first show, so great. It really was for most people to see themselves in it.
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say they're ugly. I mean, Christine Applegate was in Married with Children. She's gorgeous, But again,
but she played it down.
Yep.
In a way too, and we Eddie O'Neill, and he's great at playing the everyman on Married with Children and everything else he does. But I mean,
and even with Roseanne, I mean, Sarah Gilbert, she's attractive, but she was somebody you're not going to see on the cover of Playboy, There was
no, that's right.
Yeah, she was somebody that was relatable, But yet,
and then the writers skewed the stories that way.
Yeah.
So that the stories were the things that would happen to everyday people, and you could believe in it because you weren't looking at glamour pusses doing it.
Exactly, Like even when you see Sarah Gilbert in High Fidelity, you can see why the guy in the record store would fall for her,
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yep.
Yeah, that was good. That's a great movie.
That's a fantastic movie.
It
Yeah.
is a fantastic movie.
Yep.
That movie is for movie lovers and for music lovers.
Yeah, I love that movie. In fact, that movie, I went through a depression back years ago because I had a girl rip my heart out, and I had a hard time dealing with the depression. And I was at work one day, and I just had this image of John Cusack come into the window and go, "You hear that? You weren't good enough to make it into the top 5. And I watched High Fidelity pretty much every night for about 3 months.
Did it help to heal you?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
And it helped.
I think,
It just helped to have something to relate
that would
to.
help. That would help to heal me. I watch movies. I think that's yeah. I appreciate what you just said. I think that's exactly what those movies are for, and that's what makes them great.
Yep.
Is that that's a movie like that. Watching it at a time like that in your life might just help to heal you.
Yeah. Oh, if I ever meet John Cusack, I am going to thank him for this, because I don't think he has any idea that
he's another guy that I just had a brief because he was in 8 Men Out.
Yep.
And he's another guy that when you meet somebody whose work you admire, and they turn out to be a cool, interesting person to talk to, it's always a treat.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking, I know we touched on the suicide depression thing earlier. I wanted to ask you what charities you're involved with. Do you have any you want to plug on here?
I really have to be honest. I'm not. I'm a kind of I'm a working class guy. I don't have the resources.
Okay.
To have a charity. I can't. I have to work to put chicken and peas on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And I have mouths to feed, and I really, my charity is myself.
You know what? I'm in the same boat. I'm in the same boat because I do this as a volunteer. I
like to be of service to people. I work as a cab driver, and I drive for a company, and I like to be of services to people in my work, and I work in the assistance phase of being a driver, which means that I pick up people from the hospital, and if it takes them a half hour to get in the car, and then a half hour to get out of the car, I don't give them any shit. I make it pleasant for them,
mm-hmm.
and I get them where they have to go safely, and I like to be of service to people in every possible way that I can, just because it makes me feel good, and that's what I feel like that we should do. So I'm just being honest about the charity thing is I don't really have any I don't have any money to offer anybody.
It's interesting you mention this because
my feeling.
I really like that you said that too, because you know what I'm doing for work right now? I'm a maintenance guy. I clean. That's what I do. I come in and I do.
I've done that work too.
Yeah.
I have also done that work too. You know what? That's decent work.
Yep.
I've been a house cleaner. I've worked maintenance. I like that. I've been a house painter,
mm-hmm.
and I like that.
Yep.
I worked in as a candy salesman, and in a big store in Manhattan, and I like that.
Did you sell Colleen Camp some candy?
You sell what?
Colleen Camp some candy?
No, this was a particular brand. Is that a Canadian candy?
Colleen Camp? No, I'm saying that the act.
Oh, Colleen Camp. Oh, I don't know. Yeah.
I know there's that scene in Joy of Sex when she blows the bubble and it smacks her face.
Yeah.
But no, I love the fact that you're very humble and and you drive a cab, and I'm just saying, I've never admitted this on here before because I worked my previous job for 19 years. I worked at a water plant with my family, and my father had to sell the business, because he was coming down with an illness and whatnot, and I moved on and I took a job here. Where I clean, I'm in the same building I'm doing this show at, so it's perfect that way, But
great. I love it, man. I love hearing that, and I really truly I don't have anything against working at anything. It really truly, as long as people treat me decently and respectfully, and we can have a pleasant interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And I work and I like working and getting paid.
Yeah. And Lisa Langlois had a lot to do with this, because when I first went to Toronto, when I went to that convention. I was on unemployment. I was in between jobs. And once I got back, I had such a great experience with her and at that convention. I said, I want to get a job so I can earn more money so I can go back, and I'm going to go back there again this fall. It's fantastic. I got motivated, and plus this podcast is so much fun to do, and talking to people like yourself that's in Joy of Sex and all these other movies, and people love this because you're not on all the magazine covers. They don't have you exploited everywhere. So I find that there's a real interest.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
That's so good to hear.
Oh, yeah. Like, there's a real...
It's really nice. It's nice to be able to talk, and it's nice to be able to air this stuff out with somebody else who's interested in culture and films and all these things too. And I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
And people love that. People will see these people and they'll be like, oh, I remember this person from this film or this person from that film. And I hear from people all the time. I'll give you another example. I interviewed John Capoulas from Breakfast Club. And he was not a huge name in the movie. But I get so many people asking questions about him because he played the janitor in the movie. And people ask me about him a lot. He was not Molly Ringwald, but people are interested.
Well, and again, I know that name, and as another actor, I know John Capoulas has done a lot of good work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it's good to hear that people asking about it.
Yep.
A lot of people are interested in the person standing on the side of the frame.
Yes.
A lot of people want to know about that person.
Well, I had a podcaster. I had a podcaster message me and ask me about John Capoulas because he wanted him on his show and wanted to know how I come to contact him. And I forgot how I come, but I had his email. So I emailed John Capoulas and I said to him, hey, this person would like to interview you on his show. How do you want me to go about it? He said, just give him my email, and hooked it right up. And John's very humble. He loved doing the interview. But it's an example, even with yourself, Farouk stood out in Joy of Sex, So there's people that will look at you and they'll be like, I remember, or I remember him from Roseanne as a neighbor. Yeah.
Well, that's very meaningful to me.
Well, I'm glad.
That means a lot, and I greatly appreciate being able to talk. And it's time for me to get on my work clothes and go put in a shift at work.
There you go. Well, we're just about ready to close off. First off, I want to thank you, Danton, for coming on my show. It was just an honor to have you come on here.
Thank you, Greg, for asking me and for having such just an open-hearted conversation with me. It was a pleasure.
What do you think of 35 years since Joy of Sex? Can you believe that?
Well, if I stop to think about time and how fast it's moving and what a thief it can be, I get a little. My head starts to spin. So I try to concentrate on just right here, right now, this moment, and just try to keep my feet on the ground and let my head daydream where it may.
Well, before I let you go, I would be honored if you do a plug for my show. Go for it.
I'm Danton Stone. I played Farouk in Joy of Sex, and you are listening to Greg Gilbert on Python's Paradise out of New Brunswick, Canada.
Thank you so much, Danton, and I wish you a great day, and God bless you. You are an absolute great guy to talk to.
Oh, same here. Right back at you, Greg. Thanks so much for initiating this.
Absolutely. You take care, and God bless you.
And you as well, sir.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.